So anyway, we got interrogated, met Dr. Luke Remley, who was our flight surgeon, talked to the commanding officer. He introduced us to the 15th Air Force 97 Bomb Group, 414 Bomb Squadron. And we would be issued the ship that we brought over, which was the last three numbers were 407. That would be our airplane. And so he told us that for the first two or three missions that we'd be the junior flyers and that we would be flying with some other crew that was amazing. It was a crew that was used to flying and had been into combat until we got our feet on the ground. And then after a few missions, why, we would all get back together and then we would be a combat team. So we got into our tents, unloaded our gear, and walked around a while. We were there for a couple, 3 days at least, and I got assigned a gun pit, which had two 20 millimeter cannons in this gun pit with sandbags around it. And then I met my two colored truck drivers who were my ammunition loaders. And in case we got jumped by the Jerry's, day or night or whenever I was there, why, the Class A uniform for that was a steel helmet. And what I was to do was run across the road, and my pit was right by the latrines, and jump into the pit, which was about 4.5, 5 foot deep, and try to knock down, if any come by, the hard stands that were right across the road from us trying to get the airplanes. And usually they said they'd be FW-190s or an ME-109. So I got used to getting in and out of the stairway of the gun pit, got used to the 20s and how they swiveled around and how I could act with them. And met the chow hounds at the mess hall, and the food wasn't that bad. It was comparatively good. Most of it was canned. And I'll digress here a little bit again. About the second, third night I was there, why, I went over to the cook shack and the coffee was on in a great big silver container on boiling all the time. You just dipped your canteen can in and had your coffee in it. Some of it was good, some of it not so good. And I asked him, what we were having that night. And he said, well, they ran out of this kind of meat and the cans hadn't come up from Foggia yet. So he was going over to the Limeys and they had an ACAC batteries all around the perimeter of our airbase. And they were assigned to those ACAC guns, British made, and they were protecting the airfield. But they also had an encampment, and it was south of us about a half a mile. And they were stationed there for a party. And sometimes I wish the heck they weren't. But anyway, I said, well, what are you going to have for stuff? Or stew or whatever. Because they ate a lot of that. And the one thing I really loved was we had canned spam. And that was great. So anyway, he told me, he said, well, we're going to have mutton. Uh-huh. And he started that stuff up. I don't know how he boiled it or whatever. And oh, God, it was a terrible smell. So we got through that. And then finally, about, I don't know, 3 or 4 days later, I noticed I was starting to really pile up dirty underwear and stuff. So I went over to the, like the CQ or the guy that was in charge of ground pounders and stuff. So I asked him, I said, now, where's the laundry room, man? So he says, well, you go over by the latrine and there's a Lister bag over there and it usually has warm water in it. And there's some GI cans over there. And he said, soap and whatever you want. And he says, wash them out and then rinse them in another can. Clean up after yourself by dumping the water and putting clean water in for the next guy and then hang them up on a line. But he said, I don't think if I was you that I'd, leave the laundry there because that's your uniforms and stuff like that. And he says, we have a bunch of Italians here that are prisoners that clean up the tent area and cut the grass, which sounds funny, but they do. Our tent area was in a whole bunch of olive trees. And so they're kind of hidden. And the only building that was out that was the one that the Jerry's didn't wreck. And it was kind of like an HQ or headquarters building. And Dr. Remley was in there and our CO and a couple, 3 of the guys that would plan where the heck we were going to go the next day. That they could make it fun and games. So anyway, as I come out of there, Mac, who was our crew chief he'd been assigned to our airplanes, the crew chief and mechanic. And I said, Matt, where do you get your laundry done? Do you do it out back? And he says, nah. He said, take it down the road here about a quarter of a mile. And he said, on the north side of the road is a little old farmhouse it's made out of brick and had white plaster on it. And so I did. I put it in a duffel bag and walked down there. And I got about 200 yards from the place. And the old man come out and he had one of these real old shotguns. And so, I put my hands up and I said, Paisan, Paisan. And so he said, American. And I turned my shoulder and pointed at Thatcher. Come on in, come on in. And he was all lovely and joyful. Then he was going to blow my head off. I guess he thought I was a German. So anyway, through my great use of the Italian language, I finally talked her into knowing that I wanted her to do my laundry and that I'd pay her in
Blue Seal money.
No, not Blue Seal. That was out lira. I had a whole pocket full of lira because they changed it when we left Algiers. They gave us all lira for our Blue Seal American money, and she liked that idea. But then she went like this, and I know she was conning me. And so I said, what do you need? So she had no scrub board. And she had 2 buckets. And they were kind of U-shaped or bottom round buckets. And she put the board in the buckets. And she went like this and she pointed to her hand. And so
She wanted to know?
Yeah.
Ah.
Mac had tipped me off about this. So I got into the laundry room and I had it wrapped up in my back pocket. And I said, "Quanto cost it? How much?" And then yente, soap. So I gave her 2 bars of soap, and boy, she was just tickled pink. And Mac told me, he said, now don't overpay them because then they'll want more. And so as I was turning around, I got just a glimpse of, they had an archway. It was kind of a story and a half house. It was all handmade stone. There was an archway, and that looked like a converted garage. But this is where the cattle were. I had 1 cow and a calf and sheep and chickens and a hog, and that's what they lived off of. But they didn't kill anything. They milked the cows and whatever. And I thought I saw a blonde-haired gal, and I couldn't figure this one out, because this is Italy. And she just ducked back. And I thought, nah, I'm saying things. So anyway, she said that my closing would be done the next morning. So I come back next day, and damn, she had an old flat iron. And they cooked outside in one of these adobe ovens. And she had a piece of metal, I don't know where they got it, off a tank or something. And with her 2 cloth apron and 2 claws, she'd slide this thing in and have hot coals underneath it. And then she'd put these 3 irons on it. And she had a board set up, and she'd take them off and touch them with her tongue, which I thought was dumb. And then she ironed our clothes. And, she even put a military crease in my uniforms. And she was really good. So I gave her, I think it was 1,000 lira, which is about $1 or half $1, $2 down there. And they were just tickled pink. So I did this for about 3 or 4 weeks, and finally Seth was going down there, and there was some other guys down there, and she's starting to do a real good business. In fact, she got a couple more tubs, and I know that they went downtown in Foggia and bought a new scrub board because it looked brand new. Ooh. So anyway, one afternoon while she invited me and Rzepski, and I think it was Winnick, in to have a piece of tomato pie. And I'd never heard of tomato pie. We went in, and they had this round table and a wood floor, and part of it was wood and part of it was dirt over here. You went out into where the cattle were, or the animals, and we sat over on this wooden table. And so she cut this tomato pie, which was like pizza, only with nothing on it but oregano and tomato juice paste and all kinds of stuff. And this was something because, they didn't have much sauce. And so I guess she waited long enough. But anyway, I can't remember the gal's name, but she introduced us to her daughter. And her daughter was there when the Germans were occupying Foggia and Macedonia. One of these officers had raped this little gal. She was about maybe 16, 17. I don't know. She was young. And she had a little girl. So, and I'm cutting a lot of this out, but we got the laundry done and everything. We got real close to them, and they enjoyed us. And we'd have, like spam left over, or maybe a bucket of stew the cook was going to throw out. And we'd figure out one way or another to get her steel helmets, and we'd take it down there. And they were tickled to death to get it. And the one time I took a pretty good sized bucket of Denny Moore stew down there, and So to pay me off, but she would, she says, well, you pay me for hiring and I was getting a little bit of Italian. And so that afternoon, why she gave me her pride possession, which meant that I was a real good friend of hers. And she'd wash my steel helmet out because I took the liner out and I had it on my head and brought the stew down in the bottom top part of my steel helmet. And so she washed my helmet out and she gave it back to me and she was all smiles. She had no teeth in front and real heavy set Italian gal. So she handed me my helmet and she's about this high. And so I took the helmet and I looked in it. It was 4 eggs, real honest to God eggs, And she just thought it was Christmas. Grinned all over, the old man, he had his arm around her, he's patting around the back. And I had 4 fresh eggs. And I thought, holy Christ. And so I got back in the bed to the camper and I told Winnick about it. And so we went out, we built a fire and we went over to Cook Shack and got some butter or margarine or whatever the hell it was. Anyway, we scrambled up the eggs. By that time, all the guys from the crew, which is 6, come back and everybody got a teaspoon of
Egg.
salt for scrambled eggs. And that's incidentally was started my cooking, which you might understand after a while as this thing goes on. But we fell in love with this little gal because she was a lot like a German. She didn't have the dark hair. She had a lightish brown hair and just as cute as a bug's ear. But the only thing she had was cloth that was made out of, what do you call them, sacks? Gunny sacks? Flour sacks and stuff like that. So, I don't know when this half hour's up, Carol, but anyway, she was going to have a birthday. We found out about it. So
What was your first communion?
well, birthday was when we went down, we bought her the shorts.
Oh.
T-shirt.
Oh, okay.
So we went
Yeah,
down to Foggia, and of course, everything not down there was higher than cat's back. So we bought her a pair of tennis shoes that were made in Germany and a T-shirt. I don't know, it was made in Yugoslavia or something, and a red pair of shorts, white T-shirt. So we took that back. And I thought that old lady, man, we're going to go crazy. And she told us that within 2 or 3 weeks, this was so great. Mangietta, that meant our food, that she wanted to feed us. And I said, niente, capisci, and she said, yeah. I said, you haven't got enough yourself. Don't be feeding us. We got food up there. So she thanked us. And so as we were leaving, the little daughter come out. And she'd always hide and look at us because I know she was scared to death of us. Because everybody was carrying, but everybody was carrying a sidearm and a steel helmet, and she couldn't tell the difference because we were in suntans then, and everybody looked the same. And she hadn't had very good experience with the Krauts anyway. So she come out and she grabbed Zep by the shoulder, and Zep knew Polish real well. So there's a comparison between Polish and Northern Italian. And so between the two of them and me, we got together and we got this hashed out that the little girl was going to wear this outfit down to church in Foggia for her communion.
First communion.
And we said, when on a calendar. And so they didn't have calendars. So I forgot, Zep or somebody had a pocket deal.
Uh-huh.
And so we opened it up and it was 19-something, 42 or 43, I think it was. Yeah, early part of 43. So anyway, it was February of 43. And so we said, okay, it was on a Sunday. So we jumped on a motorcycle. And
Carla Hartley again.
Everybody had money. You didn't know what to do with it. You played poker with $10,000 and it didn't mean anything. And you couldn't really get a ship back overseas because you weren't set up for it. So I had a foot locker that I made out of an old bomb case, and it was sitting on the foot of my bed, and every time the paymaster would come around and pay me, I'd just dump it in his foot locker. And when I went down to get clothes washed, I'd just grab a handful of it and stick on my shirt, plus some soap. And so anyway, we went downtown, and we shopped, and we looked, and we couldn't find a goddamn thing, or damn thing. And so finally, I stopped an old lady, and I said, capisci communion? And she shook her head yes. And I said, little one, understand? Yes. And I said,
Communion.
girl, girl. Okay. So I said, dress. Ah, communion dress. Yeah, that's what we want. So she took me by the hand. We went around the corner and down an alleyway and up a set of steps that reminded me of Algiers. And I thought, oh, where are we going here? So anyway, in the back room, we walked in. There's a whole bunch of these old treadle machines. You know, a sewing machine that had the thing on it. You had to turn it and then they'd pump it. Or I guess it went this way.
Yeah. For
So two gals back there sewing. And they were sewing for a shop that sold uniforms over in the Isle of Capri, which someday
we'll get to
Kate
that.
Lynn's long enough. I'll get to that later. I never realized that this would take so long. So anyway, I walked in, and the thing that made me just about die laughing was here's this old broad pumping this thing, and she was sewing something on a guy's leather jacket. And so I looked over here across the middle of the machine was Singer. And I thought, well, that's me at home, you know. And I remember my mom used to have an old Singer sewing machine. So anyway, they stopped, and they, you know, none of these people really trusted us, and I don't blame them. And they got up and they, you know, they just took the kind of a shock. And I think more than anything it was a gun and a helmet that did it.
Frightening.
And so this gal told her, that she was a grandma, and she told in Italian, we wanted to buy a communion dress. And she was a pretty sharp old lady, because I could damn near tell that she was saying to him, you know, money's no problem, money's no problem. And these broads lit up like daylight. Oh, shoes, socks, ribbons, hat, you know, you want to think on that. And this cost kept going up and up and up. Of course, they didn't know, we didn't care. So anyway, I think it'll come to something like 13,000 liter. And I had about 8,000 or 9,000. Zep had some. And the gal, we were about 500 lira short, which is about $5, of having the total amount of money. And so the old gal, she said, and she must have went to the same church. She said she was going to pay it. And I said, no, you don't have any money. No good. And so this old lady, she was a tight old bitch. She pulled all this stuff back off the counter, because we were standing on that side, and here's the counter, and the sewing machines are over. Geez, I can remember that. Sewing machines are on an angle. Counter was here, and the exit was here, and the doorway was right there. And the whole thing wasn't just about the size of our living room here. And so I said, you know, how much? Quite cost it? And she said 150,000 there. And I said, well, you know, we haven't got any more. And you know, she's using her old head boy. And so she looked at me and she said, chocolate? And I said, I got no chocolate, because it melted. And she smiled again and she said, cigarette? I said, yeah, I got a pack of cigarettes. And she says, how many gone? You know, and now I knew I was being conned. So I said, oh, about 3 or 4. She says, second pack? Zep didn't smoke. So I had some out in the saddlebag, and I had carton out there. So I went out and I got a pack of cigarettes out there. And then I took another pack and I put them in my back pocket. So I went in and I tossed it on the counter, and she says, fine, you know, not gently, bono. And I said, you're welcome, you know. And so she folded this stuff up, and I said, you rap pretty bold. Oh no paper. So I said, wrap, shoes, everything, pretty bold. No paper. Cigarette? I said to her, cigarette? Oh yeah, bono. And I pulled it out of my pocket. Man, we got that sucker wrapped up, the shoes were wrapped up, and I gave her the pack of cigarettes, and we got the hell out of there. So anyway, we took it back to the base, and about 7 or 8 of us went in on this thing. We all went down there on a Sunday morning about 5 o'clock, and we gave this stuff to her, and it was something else. She had her communion, it was real neat.
You know, like a sore thumb.
Oh yeah, geez. We didn't go. We went down to the church, but I didn't want to go in. But anyway, she wore that dress, and then we had
Like a little copper penny.
oh yeah, I forgot what the heck to call this camera, but it was for taking pictures of bomb runs, and a big tank on the side. So the word got around, and a photographer for our squadron come down, and he took a bunch of pictures. And they come out, you know, they're 9x12s, big suckers. And this is a big handheld camera. So he went back up, he took about 6 pictures of her. And then one picture of the old lady, and she went in and put a new apron on. And,
Ooh,
well,
big time. Hey,
Yeah, he went up and developed it and brought it back about 2 days later and gave him to him. But boy, they were just real great people. And the old man, every once in a while, pardon me, I'd get from the States, either from Dad or somebody, or Bob or somebody. No, it wasn't Bob. But I don't know where I got them. But anyway, I get a couple, maybe a half dozen cigars. So I take 1 or 2 down there and give it to the old man. Man, he just thought that was great. Yeah, he'd kill that pig if I wanted to. But he didn't want to kill a pig because until she had young ones, and then they slaughtered the young ones or trade them around anyway. So they always had food. But that was a little girl in her community, which made everybody in our crew feel real good because we did a real nice thing. And then I kept writing home and wrote to a guy named Dick Johnson, and his father was pretty rich, and he was a principal or something of a school. And every once in a while, I'd have Dick send me a carton of cigarettes over, and then I could smile and say, "See that?" And I'd get about anything I wanted. Well, I'll tell you, and that was about the end of that. How much time do you have left?
Oh,
I can go on remission or whatever.
let's save that for the next tape. I think this is going to end. Ouch. This is going to end the first tape, Craig.
Well, just